There's a civil war going on for the soul of a nation, for the soul of a black nation, for the soul of black folk, if you will. It's a war about how we're going to think about criminal wrongdoers and those caught up in mass incarceration. How we're going to think about people like my dad, who, when I was 8 years old, got 22 to 55 years for possession and sale of marijuana. Fortunately, he was able to find the key to the jailhouse door to his prison cell in the warden's own law book, teaching himself criminal law, criminal procedure, constitutional law, making the frozen circumstances dance by playing to them their own melody. I teach his case now in my criminal law class, Armour versus Salisbury. But nevertheless, he was branded a criminal, and he carried that stigma to the last day of his life. So how do we think about mass incarceration and those caught up in it, staggering numbers, and the black criminals among us? Well, there's a politics of respectability lenses that we can look at them through. And Chris Rock, for example, in a routine that launched his comedic career, invites us to look at criminals through these lenses. And I'm going to quote him verbatim. There's a civil war going on in black America. And there's two sides. There's black people and there's niggers. And niggers have got to go. I love black people, but I hate niggers. There are 5 problems with this politics of respectability approach to criminal matters. 5 reasons to reject it. 1, we're talking about up to 90%. I had to pinpoint cite this in a recent article I wrote for a law review. The editor said, can you give us the pinpoint cite? And we pinpoint cited, yes, empirically, up to 90% of the young black males in some of our inner city neighborhoods, i.e. some of those around here, are going to wind up in jail, on probation, or on parole at some point in their lives. So according to Rock's and Kennedy's distinction, up to 90% of our young black males are niggas or bad Negroes that we need to distinguish and distance ourselves from. Problem number 2, this so-called good Negro, bad Negro distinction rooted in the politics of respectability, personal responsibility, really conceals and masks class bigotry. It's a moral distinction, right? But it's really a class distinction more masquerading as a moral distinction. Because it just so happens that when you do the numbers, just crunch them, the vast majority of middle-class blacks have about the same crime rate as middle-class whites. So the vast majority of black criminals are coming from the ranks of truly disadvantaged blacks, poor blacks. That's where the vast majority are coming from. And so either people are poor because they're bad, which doesn't make any sense, or bad because they're poor. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. You take a group of people, you disproportionately concentrate them in desperate circumstances, and it should sadden but not surprise you if they disproportionately turn to desperate undertakings like crime. Be that as it may, you have people who say it's a moral distinction, don't look at the class dimensions. How can you not look at the class dimensions when you have people in my own neighborhood, View Park? You take View Park, you put it together with Baldwin Hills, Windsor Hills, throw in maybe Ladera Heights, you have the largest contiguous neighborhoods, contiguous set of neighborhoods of middle and upper middle class black folk in the nation, right? That area where I live, View Park, the LA Times recently called it the Black Beverly Hills, may be the good Negro capital of America, right? And I've had my good Negro neighbors tell me when our sons have gone out and made friends in a lot of places because they play AAU basketball, Little League baseball, Pop Warner football, made friends in all kinds of neighborhoods everywhere. When their friends came to visit them in our house, in our home up in the hills, I've had neighbors tell me, we don't want Compton up here. I've had a sheriff tell an event planner, we don't want South Central up here. We have an economically gated mentality that we're taking to our own community, and we're spatially profiling. That's spatial profiling. These same black Brahmins who rail against racial profiling when it's practiced against them don't have any qualms about practicing spatial profiling against other blacks, poor blacks, disadvantaged blacks. That's problem number 2, 90% and a class bigotry at the heart of it. Third, let's talk about the new Jim Crow. From this mentality, from this personal responsibility, politics of respectability perspective, there's no such thing. You can't call mass incarceration the new Jim Crow, like Michelle Alexander effectively has in her new book. But they would say, no, no, no. The old Jim Crow was about innocent Negroes being oppressed socially, the social oppression of innocent Negroes, Martin, Medgar, Rosa. The victims, they would say, of new Jim Crow, those caught up in mass incarceration, are criminals who made bad decisions. They're not innocent Negroes, and they've sometimes preyed on the most vulnerable members of their own community. What's this moral equivalence, they would say, between Martin, Medgar, and Rosa on the one hand, and a gangbanger, dope dealer, and prostitute on the other? I don't get it. Big difference between social oppression and self-destruction. Mass incarceration is self-destruction. The old Jim Crow was social oppression. What they don't get is that there can be social oppression in self-destruction. That's what they're missing. Take Sandra Bland. Recent case, she did everything right when that officer stopped her by the side of the road. She stood on her constitutional right. She didn't do anything that I wouldn't tell one of my law students to do. For being dignified, for being proud, for standing on her constitutional rights, she was humiliated, spirit murdered, but regardless of whether she took her life by her own hand. Even if we assume, for the sake of argument, she took her life by her own hand, that there was self-destruction, in other words, that there was suicide, that self-destruction was the product of social oppression. It was the product of ugly, vicious police brutality. You can have social oppression in self-destruction. The school right around the corner from me, Crenshaw High, in 2005, lost its accreditation. You played by all the rules. You did everything you were supposed to do as a student in that school, and you get to your senior year and find out that the diploma that you're getting, which is the legitimate means to the American dream, education, the diploma you're getting is worth toilet paper in the admissions process because it's coming from an unaccredited high school. What a cruel hoax has been played on you. Right? If I'm in that school, if a better chance hadn't pulled me out of the inner city and given me a chance to go to a better school, if I were stuck in that kind of situation, I could very well imagine myself standing under a lamppost with some beige rocks in my palm. That's because there's social oppression in self-destruction, even if that is a self-destructive act by me selling rocks. Fourth reason to reject this politics of respectability and the distinction between good and bad Negroes, lovable black people, condemnable niggas on the other hand. Fourth reason, it's spiritually obtuse. I'm just going to be real brief about this. When we had Stanley Tookie Williams put to death under Governor Schwarzenegger some years back, I did a play. I said, should we pour liquor for Tookie? Should we pour libation? Should we express some kind of ritual solidarity with a cold-blooded killer? As part of the play, and I had a conversation with one of my colleagues who said, yes, we both are Christians, said, yes, off with his head. I said, well, what do you think about somebody who killed hundreds, thousands of women, children, all kinds of people for no other reason that didn't agree with the way they believed, the way they thought? She said, oh, that's easy, off with his head. I said, you know, the person I just described is Paul, who was Saul before he was Paul. What was Saul on the road to Damascus to do? To kill some more innocent Christians. And yet, if we had given him capital punishment, if he had suffered capital punishment, we wouldn't have a New Testament. He's the one who went around and got Luke, John, Matthew, everybody else. Right? Redemption. right? Rather than looking at the world through the lenses of politics of respectability, personal responsibility, i.e. retribution, retaliation, and revenge, what about restoration, reconciliation, and redemption? Right? We talk that on Sunday morning. We talk restoration, reconciliation, and redemption on Sunday morning. Then Monday through Saturday, we think and practice retribution, retaliation, and revenge. Finally, number 5, the 5th reason to completely reject this dichotomy between good and bad Negroes, putting as much distance between law-abiding blacks and black criminals as possible. It is futile. It's an exercise in futility. Like Stevie Wonder said in one of his most trenchant lyrics, you might make big cash, but you cannot cash in your face. All right, you aren't going to be able to run away from the black tax and racial profiling just because you got a high tax bracket or some kind of fancy zip code. Right? As long as they don't look good, you don't look good. As long as they're stuck in criminogenic conditions that lead to higher crime rates, they're going to provide the statistical support for people to profile you. So the only way you're going to escape that black tax is by helping to lift truly disadvantaged blacks out of the poverty that disproportionately causes us to turn them, I was once them, us to turn to crime in the first place. If they don't look good, we don't look good. It has to be one love, and at the end of the day, and I'll end here, the reason we can't afford this kind of dichotomy that these politics of respectability proponents keep suggesting is we all we got. We really are. We all we got.